Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the 2 Deep here, where we're breaking down Class AA football here in Montana. I am one of your hosts, Anthony Knockrunner. My co-host, John Kemper, joining us as well. As, again, we're looking forward to the high school football season, hoping we're going to get a season. Class AA football will not start until September 11th. We're going to talk about some of the things, the results of the MHSA meeting from earlier this week on Thursday, as well as looking forward to our most anticipated games in the Eastern Conference. John, like I said, it's going to be a fun show. We got a lot planned here today.
Yeah, we got a lot to get through. Like you said, going through the MHSA and what they passed down on Thursday. And then, of course, looking at the top games that we're looking at in the East. These don't represent necessarily the top games that the teams may think they are, and they're not necessarily the rivalry games, but just ones as we look through the schedule that we thought would be fun. If we could attend them, those would be the ones that we would hit that night for sure.
I was about to say, and I'm jacked. I mean, we're pretty much at that point now where we have practices, and I'm pretty excited just for practices. It's almost kind of like the NFL rule where you're excited for preseason for like the first week, but then you can't wait for the regular season. I'm jacked that we have practices going on. Some teams are waiting till this upcoming week. Other teams started on Friday. How about you, man? Just excited that we have practice.
Yeah, I'm excited that we're at this point. And Helena and Capital and some others started practice on Friday, at least meetings and stuff. They'll start on earnest on Monday. A lot of others will as well. And then as we move through the week, it was interesting today. I was able to read an article from Montana Sports by Sam Hoyle that just kind of talked to Coach Evans and Coach Mihelish and how they're viewing it as a positive to have basically an extra week of practice here, or an extra week or two of practice to, solidify some things. And I'm sure if we dove deep into each school, and I know we will as we get closer to the games, we can see maybe what those practices will look like for the teams and what are some things that they can work on that they normally would kind of have to work on quick and then get into the season and make adjustments. Maybe they can work on those sooner so the adjustments once they get into the season won't be as fast and furious as they could be.
I was about to say this extra time is going to be an advantage because essentially with conference-only schedules, you have to get on the right foot early if you want to try and get good seeding in the postseason. We'll break down schedules a little bit later on with future episodes. But, John, let's just dive right into this thing. Obviously, the MHSA, they approved what the AAADs had already decided, which was last week, and they decided that they were going to go ahead and just get rid of the non-conference games. There was overwhelming support from the AAADs, and so I want to make sure, and I want to clear this up. The MHSA didn't cancel the non-conference games, and it's not to say and put blame on the ADs that they canceled them. It's not so much that. It's just it's a unique situation. I don't think there's blame to be put, but first, the MHSA, they didn't cancel them. They just approved what the AAADs asked for.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what people need to realize in this. I think we're finding that some people think that MHSA is the be-all, end-all for making every decision and whether we have a season or not with any sport. And while they make the final decision, there is so much input, and they're an advisory board almost to an extent where they did exactly what the ADs wanted to do in canceling the non-conference games. But when we get into if certain counties are allowed to play games or not, we have to understand that it's not the MHSA necessarily making that ruling. It's the county health departments that are making that ruling, and the MHSA is coming alongside that ruling. They're not the ones that actually lay that down or put that down. So I think we've had some people that have been very upset with the MHSA, and I think they need to understand that they're not the be-all, end-all when it comes to this, that they take a lot of things into an account. And I think the track record that the MHSA has charted over this last 6-8 months has been, I think, for the most part, pretty measured. If you think back to spring, they waited to the very last second before they canceled anything. When a lot of people were telling them to cancel, said they might as well cancel. Other states were telling them to cancel, but they waited until the very last second. And I think in this situation, it's going to be the same deal. And I'm glad for that because we don't need knee-jerk reactions. We don't need to cancel something because some other state cancels something. We need to take into account what's happening in Montana, and what's happening in each county where our AA team is, and what the health departments are saying in those counties.
And you just hit a really big topic there, John, because let's face it, as much as, the MHSA, you may not be happy with the decisions they've made in years past, but the health department, they're the ones leading the charge in this. They've been the ones that have been in charge ever since this pandemic has really gotten going, because everyone's been kind of going to, okay, who are the people that have say in a particular county that are in that county? And that's really important to note here, because that's the biggest challenge these AAADs are going to face, is trying to get health departments and each city kind of on some kind of same page to be able to play games in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. They have to juggle all of this. And I am not envious of their position right now and what they have to do. If you look at what they did on Thursday, canceling non-conference games only for AA, they didn't cancel them for A, B, or C. The other thing they tabled was a proposal to move football to spring that had passed with AAADs. We don't know if that was by one or unanimous, or we don't know the vote count on that, but they tabled it. And that makes me kind of think that, this is all or nothing. We're either going to have fall football or we're not going to have fall football.
Yeah, I was going to say it's going to be interesting. And no matter what happens as we go throughout the season, understand this: the season is going to constantly be on edge and on the brink of being canceled just because of certain situations. I think that's just going to be a realization for coaches, an uncomfortable realization as that's going to be, because going in from one week to the next week, you just never know what's going to happen. All that work you put towards a season, anything's possible in terms of how this season goes and how long it may go as well.
Yeah, and we are going to live under the reality all season, and probably all sports season for 2020 and 2021, of the possibility of one coronavirus positive case in a program can kill the whole team can kill the whole team's play for at least 2 weeks, or they just cancel, for the season. Right. We just don't know. So we're walking a very fine line, and we could wake up next Wednesday and it could all be over. So that's just the reality of a lot of this. And I think, Anthony, one thing we've seen and heard a lot as we've talked to people is some people feel the unusual amount of attention on football, and making it seem that other sports like volleyball, soccer, golf, cross country don't matter in this. And I don't think that's the case. I think when we get into this, football is one of those very high-risk sports when it comes to coronavirus, and a lot more precautions have to be taken than, say, in golf. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you think we are putting a premium on football and forgetting about these other sports in the fall?
I don't think we're forgetting them. I just think that there's already solutions for those sports. When you look back at the MHSA guidelines, you look at cross country. Well, they have pretty simple rules. All right, they're going to stagger start times. Not everybody's going to be out on the race, and not everybody's going to be clumped up and everything else. It's going to be more about times than just an actual race itself. So, and obviously cross country times are what make the ultimate victor. And so when I look at golf, all right, we're going back essentially to what we used to have. We just for the last couple of years have had spectators on golf courses, but now we're going to see golfers just play their round, get back on the bus. They're going to play one-day tournaments. It's not going to be combined 2 days, 3 days, whatever. I don't know what they're going to do with the state tournament, but for right now, those sports can social distance. The solutions are there. The way to get this thing done is socially distanced as possible and trying to mitigate as much risk as possible is being done. Soccer, kind of similar. Again, you're talking about maybe 4 to 5 people around the ball at one time. You're not talking about a huge group of people around the ball at one time. And so that's another piece of the puzzle. Volleyball, again, for volleyball players, I don't know how they're going to do this, because you've just been so coached to doing this, because I've been to volleyball games where all of a sudden, hey, one team gets a point, the entire group gets together, high five, chant, whatever it is. Well, now they can't do that. Now they got to come up with something totally different. So that's when you worry about the issue for volleyball, and at the same time, the same ball, that's obviously a part of it. When we look at football, there's the most kids, the most participants of the sports in the fall. That's football. And at the same time, you're talking about 22 players on the field to play one ball, and you've got 5 offensive linemen, 4 defensive linemen within yards of each other. So I think we're looking at football because we're trying to figure out the most creative alternatives without altering the game so much. And so I think that's the bigger piece of the puzzle here, is trying to figure out how can we play this game and be able to do it safely, where we've done that to a degree as much as you can, I think, for the other sports.
Yeah, and one big thing, we have this limit of 50 people in an area. Well, when you get to volleyball, you don't have 50 players, sitting on each sideline or sitting combined. You can control that a lot easier. When you get to football, it is not unusual to see 50, 60, even 70 players out there on the sidelines suited up or ready to go. And that's not counting coaches. So if you're saying only 50, participants, well, football, I don't know how you do that. You really can't do that very easily, if at all, and be safe in doing it. So, when we look at football, there has to be some sort of exclusion, or there has to be some sort of allowance to allow both sides to have 50 people on the sideline. Talking to some coaches around the state, they feel they can have about 40 players on the sideline, and they'll be able to have a game, and they'll be able to social distance, because remember, one of the guidelines is they spread out to the 10-yard line on each side for the players. So you're going to be able to spread out those off the sidelines on it. But something that we talked about, I think you might have to have something from the governor's office that's going to actually give them basically a permit saying that football is exempted from having that 50, but maybe setting a number to maybe you only have 110.
Well, there's already the waiver out right now. We don't know what the status of that waiver is right now, where that's at with the governor, if that's on his desk, what the communication, what the talks are like at this point. But we do know the waiver's out there, and the waiver's crucial for AA football because, again, we're talking about the difference between Class A and Class B. And granted, there are Class A and Class B teams around these metropolitan areas, obviously, that may be included in these counties, but they're not directly in the city. For a lot of our AA teams, they're in the city that, the major metropolitan areas of Montana, Flathead Glacier, they're in Kalispell. Helena Capital, they're in Helena. You look at the Billings schools, you look at the Missoula schools, they're in Missoula, they're in Billings. And so I think that's the tough part about this is too, is where, because we kind of look at the A's and the B's, well, they're obviously spread out. They don't share facilities for one. Yep. They all have their own places for the most part. And as far as I know, there's only 2, and I had to get corrected on this the other day. Belgrade and Butte are the only 2 AA teams right now with their own stadium that they don't share.
Yep, that's it for them. And that creates, that creates a lot more logistics, a lot more moving parts. And something that we have to take into account too is typically AA games have more fans at the games than a typical A, B, or C. I mean, maybe not as many. I mean, it might be closer between A and AA, but in AA, on a Friday night in a lot of stadiums, you're going to have 1,000 or more people in the stands watching the game. So that's the bigger issue in this is, can they even have fans? Are they going to be able to have any at all, or are family and fans going to have to watch or listen to these games?
Again, I know we've talked about this. We've hammered this the last 2 episodes as well. Again, I just state that my opinion is for right now, maybe that first game you don't, just to see and how we get through, because I mean, and ultimately here's the other thing too that we need to take into account, and I meant to mention this earlier. Utah had a bunch of games last night. They had one Thursday night, and they had a whole slate of 50 games across the state of Utah last night. They had a whole slate of 50 games on Friday night, and so that's really something to really keep an eye on, as well as what those results, because they had fans too.
Yep, exactly. And as we make these decisions, we do have to look a little bit at the states, other states, and things that are happening, but we have to make the decisions based on what's best for Montana and what the health departments really think what's best at that point. Because let's face it, that's who's going to make a lot of these decisions, and then the MHSA is going to have to be the one to to implement those. One thing I wanted to talk about with playoffs, because one of the things in the MHSA notes on Thursday is in A and B, they eliminated 4 playoff spots and they went, I believe, to 8.
I know A did. I didn't know B did.
I could be wrong on B, but A did. Yeah. A went from 12 to 8, 4 in the West, 4 in the East. Is that something that we could see for the AA this year, where everybody was bound to make the playoffs, or, planned to make the playoffs just by that structure? But in the hopes of getting a season fully in, do they eliminate those other playoff teams and just go with the top 4 in each side of the state?
I have to imagine that is an option that's on the table, because obviously we don't have the problem we had last year where we only had 15 teams. So the Eastern Conference is going to have their full 7 games. The Western Conference is going to have their full 7 games. So you could say, for just this season at least, until they decide to ultimately what they want to do for the playoffs going forward, top 4 from the West, top 4 from the East, and go that route. That's going to be interesting because, you have to obviously go, 1-4, all that stuff. But I think that's definitely got to be an option, and it wouldn't surprise me if by the time we did get to the postseason, if we just said, okay, hey, we're taking the top 4, and you're only creating 3 weekends of postseason football.
That's it. Yeah, you save some time there. The chance of finishing out and having a state champion actually crowned instead of having to share becomes a much more viable solution than adding in a week, at least 1 week extra of playoffs.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, I know we're talking playoffs, but man, just thinking about it, I'm like, man, I just hope we get to that point, at this realm, because we're essentially still a month out before we even get to the start of the season for these football teams. And one other thing I do want to get your thoughts on, John, is because obviously this was, as you mentioned it on top of the show, was the spring proposal. Again, it's going to be very tough to do spring, but again, if I had to look at what this may look like, because there was a model thrown out there, and I believe Great Falls School District meeting threw this out there, where they had 4 seasons. Essentially, you move basketball up, you move the winter sports up by just moving to the start of November. You finish, beginning of February. Then you start football and volleyball and everything else, and then you could go to the track by the start of May. Football would be done by the end of April, and track would start in May and go beyond and go into June. There's obviously that particular model. But, I mean, for me, I look at it, it's either got to be March to Memorial Day weekend or middle of February to finish by April. That's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think I don't like the spring idea. I just –
That's fair.
Honestly. Let's say we do that, and let's say we move basketball and wrestling up to November. Well, who's to say this is all done? Who's to say we're at a point in the state where we can even handle sports like that? Because, I mean, we want to talk about a high-risk sport like football. Well, Wrestling is probably the highest risk. Basketball, there's a lot of contact in basketball as well. So I don't know if that would actually be a solution. We might do that and hit 2 weeks before November, and we're pushing basketball back because, we don't have a handle on this yet in the state of Montana, and we're still dealing with it.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not really, I don't like the idea of spring. But again, if you had to go that route to get it in, I think it's better than nothing, obviously. But again, I'm kind of with you. I'm just not thrilled about the idea. Plus, I mean, let's face it, we all know what winter is. I mean, we don't like being outside. We kind of move in. We're always in the gymnasium in the months of February and March. And even then, between March and May, we know that the weather is just not predictable, because how many track meets do we see canceled or postponed or moved to other dates just because the weather just doesn't cooperate? So it'd be a really tough task with spring football, no question about it.
The one thing about spring football, even with the bad weather, every stadium in AA except 2 have turf. So
yes,
you wouldn't be dealing with a rock solid hard field at most of the stadiums. You would at Vigilante and you would at Belgrade. And then if it warmed up, you're going to deal with a lot of mud and stuff. But you know what? If it meant that they could play, the players could play, they're going to play. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just the way it's going to be. And we want to get every sports season in, obviously.
Absolutely.
I know the MHSA does. I know the ADs do. I would imagine the health departments do as well. So they're going to do whatever they have to do to make this work for the teams for the entire school year, not just this fall to 2020.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Obviously, as we mentioned, we still have a month till we get to the start of the season. John, let's go ahead and jump into something that's a little bit more fun. Obviously, we've kind of breaking down what the MHSA results were, the MHSA meeting, the possibilities that we have here. Let's dive into obviously something. The whole reason why we did this show is because we want to talk more in depth about Class AA football matchups. Let's break that down. You picked 4 teams. I have 4 teams. We picked the matchup for them on their schedule that we think is the most interesting matchup for them, and it's going to be a big teller for them as well. So, John, I'll give the lead to you. Who are you starting off with?
And again, just a reminder, these are the games that we think are neat. They are exciting, not necessarily what the teams might think, and it may not be your rival. In fact, we tried to slide away from the rivals as much as we could. But my first one is Billings West and Bozeman. These two teams have been the state champs the last few years. It is a battle when they play. Coach Weshy and Coach Stanton are going to have their teams ready to go. It just seems like they have this machine that just turns out talent year after year after year. You have a lot of experience on both of those teams coming back in personnel. And the reality is this game could decide who wins the AA in the East this year.
It certainly did last year, so I have no reason to believe that there's not a good chance that it could happen again. I think there's definitely going to be some more teams that are definitely going to want to challenge and win the Eastern Conference, no question about it. I think there are some teams that could definitely do it, but at least here in the preseason, you got to look at West and you got to look at Bozeman and just say those are the two that are probably going to match up to decide the Eastern Conference.
Yep, absolutely. What do you got, Anthony? What's your first one?
My first one's going to be Skyview in Belgrade. This was a heck of a ball game. This was, again, a Week 7 game. Belgrade edged out and got their first AA victory over Skyview last season, 12-7. This game is going to have some big importance because this is going to be playoff seeding. And I think this is also going to be a game that if we do stick to the format that we've had with the postseason where everybody goes, this is going to be a big momentum game for going into the postseason for either one of these teams. I look at Belgrade. They've got some great weapons. Mason Jacobson's going to be an absolutely phenomenal football player. You look at Tate Ballard, Brady Mounts. They return some skill guys for sure. They got to figure out what they're going to do at the quarterback position. You also look at Skyview with Willems coming back as well for Skyview. They've got a lot of questions. I think they could be a very young team this year, but I think they're going to be a scrappy ball club. And so Skyview and Belgrade for me, I think it's going to be a really interesting game towards the end of the year. And these are two teams that I look at as being upset potential teams and really could throw some things chaotically into the Eastern Conference.
Well, my next one is CMR and Great Falls. So I just said that we're not going to pick rivals. But as I looked at this one was too hard not to pick. And you have Great Falls, who I think is one of the top 3 teams in the East for sure. And they have a lot of weapons. They're bringing a lot back. Coach Sam's great job there. And then you have CMR, new coach, returning personnel, but with the new coach, some new systems being put in. And, CMR has a lot of pride. They have a lot of history and tradition. And, I would imagine CMR wants to be, they feel they are that team that should be on top. That's their rightful place. And they're going to come after it. So their first step in that is winning their city. And I think that's what's going to make that game so much fun to watch, is that fight for Great Falls between the Bison and the Rustlers.
My next game is, as I take a look at the Bozeman Hawks, obviously the reigning champs in Class AA football, made 5 state title appearances in the last decade as well. For me, the matchup that I'm really intrigued by is Bozeman at Great Falls. Great Falls has been a really good defensive team the last couple of years. They've got some really great wideouts this year. They're going to have a young quarterback, so obviously that's always a question mark. Offensive line-wise, they got some big boys up front, especially on the O-line and D-line. When you look at guys like Ethan DeRoche, as well as Quentin Greer. I know Quentin Greer's had tremendous success on the wrestling mat as well. So those two guys are going to be pivotal up front for Great Falls, and that's going to really help against Bozeman, I think. But Bozeman, for me, again, this is going to be a big test for them just because I think for them, again, Great Falls is a team that I think is going to take that next step, and they are going to challenge Bozeman and Billings West to try and be the top team in the Eastern Conference. So for me, Bozeman, they've got a tall order with Great Falls. That's going to be a very interesting matchup for me, just looking at Bozeman's schedule in the Eastern Conference.
So I have Belgrade, and I picked Belgrade and Gallatin. And the reason I picked that is both these teams, they're the two newest teams coming into the AA. Of course, Belgrade came in last year. Gallatin, this is the first year. This is obviously in the Gallatin Valley, so these players know each other, these coaches know each other, and they're going to be fighting it out for some bragging rights in the county, and also just in the Eastern AA as well. Like you talked about with Belgrade a little bit ago, if they could get on a little bit of a run, I mean, this is just better playoff position for them if they can get wins against a team like Gallatin. And Gallatin, they have opportunities to make statements all season long, taking on everybody in the East. And this would be one that they could really, solidify if they beat Belgrade to really, move up in those rankings.
Yeah. For me, I look at another game of the Eastern Conference. I just got done talking about Great Falls. I'm specifically looking at them on their schedule. Billings West. Great Falls played Billings West really tough late in the season. They got 4 turnovers. They came up just short to Billings West, 14-7 last season at Great Falls. So for me, I think Great Falls really wants to, again, if you want to take a shot at getting to the top, you got to beat the guys that are there. If you want to be the best, you got to, if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And so you got to take down teams like Billings West, and you got to take down teams like Bozeman. For Great Falls, again, Levi Torgerson, going to be a heck of a ball player this year, I think. The matchup between him and Taco Dowler is going to be really interesting, I think, as well. And so, again, I think Great Falls, they've got some big boys up front. We'll see what they can do because Billings West has got one of the bigger offensive lines, at least in the state, if not in the AA. And so for Great Falls, this is a big test for them too because I know they've been coming up short against Billings West, and they want to end that streak of we're getting so close. They want to beat these guys and let everybody else know in the Eastern Conference that Great Falls is here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. My last one's Gallatin, and I'm going to pick Gallatin and Bozeman, and that just seems probably like a developing natural rivalry that's going to happen over the next few years. But this first one's going to be a lot of fun because you're going to have players that knew each other extremely well. In a lot of cases, maybe played with each other on the same teams, and now they're split. And you have a new school that is going to have a lot of pride and going to want to try to beat the old man in the city. And you have Bozeman that has a lot of pride. And I would imagine they're going to say, man, this team is never going to beat us. This is going to be a game that we're never going to lose. And, Gallatin will be the interesting one. As they move forward this year and into the future. There's so much talent in the Bozeman area. You can see Gallatin moving up and becoming a team to be reckoned with very, very quickly in the Montana AA. So again, if they could come into this and knock their rival school or their partner school in the school district off, wow, what would that do to the old Raptors?
It'll be really interesting. Like I said, those are some great matchups there that John's been talking about. My final matchup is this is going to be the first one that we're going to see around September 11th. Senior and Bozeman. Look at this from Senior's perspective. Senior, they've got talented football players. Michael Olin coming back at quarterback's got a great repertoire with one of my top wide receivers in Junior Bergen at Billings Senior. Junior Bergen's got great speed. He can do anything he really wants on the field. He can take it deep, and he can go short with a wide receiver screen, and he's quick enough and agile enough to make guys miss and take it 60 yards on you. So Junior Bergen's going to be a tough matchup for Bozeman, who's returning some new DBs to their defense. Again, Bozeman's got 9 of 11 defenders coming back, but you lose a great corner in a guy like Carter Ash. It's just tough to replace a guy like him. So senior, I think they've got some opportunities with the secondary for Bozeman. Also, senior's offensive line. One of the things that's really kind of troubled senior the last couple of years is just they haven't had the big boys up front. And if they've got some, they're going to need him because Luke Fedek as well as Ken Iden are going to be coming off the edges. I mean, if you thought Ken Iden was a nightmare alone, imagine this guy Luke Fedek that can come off the other side and off the other edge. Michael Olin is going to have to keep his head on a swivel for both of those defensive ends coming after him. And I think seniors struggled running the football the last 2 years. And so can they get a running game going? I thought one of their running backs returning was going to be there. He's over at Billings Central now. So the running back spot's wide open. But senior against Bozeman week 1 is going to be one heck of a matchup to start things off in the Eastern Conference. Because as we've talked about, obviously Billings West and Bozeman, I think your challengers right now on paper are Great Falls and Senior to those two teams. And Senior can make an early statement if they get off to a good foot against the Bozeman Hawks.
Yeah, well, those are the games that Anthony and I identified in the East. Next week we'll do the West. But needless to say, we have a lot of good football to look forward to this year as long as we can get it in, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Real quick, I'll just recap, though, the 4 games that I had, which was Skyview, Belgrade, Bozeman at Great Falls at West, and Senior versus Bozeman. John, what 4 games did you have?
I had West and Bozeman. I had CMR and Great Falls, Belgrade and Gallatin and Bozeman. So those are the 4 I got.
Yeah, those are some exciting matchups. 8 games that we're really going to be looking forward to throughout the Eastern Conference slate and schedule here. And, John, I can't believe it's already that time. Time to start wrapping this thing up here.
Yeah, so as we wrap up, just, a quick review. MHSA voted to approve what the ADs in the AA asked, and that is to get rid of non-conference games. A spring proposal was tabled at that time. And as of right now, most teams by this week will be practicing, and we will get into AA football. But if one thing goes wrong, we could see the whole season go up just like that, but hopefully not.
Hopefully not, because otherwise I don't know what we're going to do with this show.
Well, yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Well, let's wrap up here. If you want to find the Two Deep on social media, you can find us at Facebook. Just go to the Two Deep Montana. And if you want to find us on Twitter, we are at the Two Deep, the number 2, and not TWO. If you want to find Anthony and I on Twitter as well, Anthony is at the Knock On Sports, and I'm simply at JT Kemper. So when you guys complain to Anthony about his top 5 lists and receivers, especially, or maybe top 10, and people feel excited, please know that's at the Knock On Sports is where you want to send all that hate mail. But for Anthony, I'm John Kemper. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next time.